Select the language. Seleziona la lingua.
Welcome to the main menu of the experience. Now I will teach you the basics commands for the game. As first thing, with your virtual hands, you can interact with most of the things. Try to grab the hat and wear it. Perfect. To look around, use the right hand joystick. To teleport instead, use the left one. If you touch the sign, you will be teleported to another part of the map faster. Try it out. I see you are getting the hang of it. Try to go near the central table to better understand the context of the experience. Try to click on one of the objects on the table to find out more about the topic. In the end, try to open your virtual menu by looking at your virtual wrist on your left hand. Open the menu by touching the watch's crown. From here you can see the current mission and the description of the objects. You can also use the menu to return to the main menu. Explore a little bit. To close the menu, click again on the crown or on the red button. Great! Now your training is complete. To begin your voyage to relive the memories of the Alpini, go to the table under the big painting. To begin, place the statue on the highlighted part.
Dear Mother and Father, winter has also come to the Lagazuoi. The thermometers have dropped to their lowest capacity, marking -20 degrees centigrade, but according to some comrades the temperature has reached a low of -37. Today, December 13, 1916, has been the worst day so far. The Telfer failed and left us without food, wood or mail. Even the stove went out, for lack of fuel. It has been a terrible day, but it is in the most despondent situations that the strongest bonds are forged. They woke me up at 2 a.m. I had just finished my shift, but an NCO never finishes work as long as he has men under his charge. The Telfer was no longer going, my help was needed to get it back up and running. From the dormitory I walked down the tunnel to the Telfer room. As soon as I got to the Telfer I knew it had to be restarted. These fuel engines suffer a lot from low temperatures. Fortunately it is much less cold in the tunnel than outside. With a little effort we would be able to get it started. To start the engine I needed the starting handle. The handle had to be inserted at the side of the engine and turned with both hands with as much force as possible. As usual, it was not in place. Another talk about order was warranted. 40 men in a tunnel needed such discipline. They had left it lying around as usual. I went in search of the handle and found it not far from the Telfer, on a table full of tools. picked up the handle and brought it back inside the Telfer room. I didn't mind establishing order. In fact, I was pleased, especially when, after a little organizing, everything worked for the best. Organization is crucial to logistics. Good logistics meant getting comrades fed, keeping them warm, and preventing them from dying unnecessarily. I can finally say that I am proud of myself. Being an NCO in the Corps of Engineers gives me a lot of satisfaction. Especially here, I inserted the handle at the side of the engine and began to turn it forward with both hands. I inserted the handle at the side of the engine and began to turn it forward with both hands. I inserted the handle at the side of the engine and began to turn it forward with both hands. Dear mother and father. Winter has. They woke me up at 2 a.m. I had just finished my shift, but an NCO never finishes work. As soon as I got to the Telfer, I knew it had to be restarted. These fuel engines suffer a lot from low temperatures. Fortunately, it is much less cold in the tunnel than outside. With a little effort, we would be able to get it started. To start the engine, I needed the starting. I picked up the handle and brought it back inside the Telfer room. I didn't mind establishing order. In fact, I was pleased, especially when, after a little organizing, everything worked for the best. Organization is crucial to logistics. Good logistics meant getting comrades fed, keeping them warm, and preventing them from dying unnecessarily. I can finally say that I am proud of myself. Being an NCO, I inserted the handle at the side of the engine and began to turn it forward with both hands. was overjoyed when the engine began to spark. The flywheel started the gears, dipped in oil, which transferred power to the pulley. The telfer was running. The supplies had finally arrived. In addition to food, wood had arrived. I absolutely had to get the stove going again. I took 3 logs of wood. We had run out of coal and we had to use wood. It was starting to get cold in the tunnel, and the sentries needed to get warm. Despite the fur coat, balaclava and boot covers, it only took a few minutes outside to suffer frostbite. Standing still in the cold is terrible. The nearest heater was in the former engine room, now used as a warehouse and storage room. The engine room had been moved to the forward tunnels. I took the 3 logs of wood and carried them to the storage room. We had run out of coal and we had to use wood. It was starting to get cold in the tunnel, and the sentries needed to get warm. Despite the fur coat, balaclava and boot covers, it only took a few minutes outside to suffer frostbite. Standing still in the cold is terrible. We had run out of coal and we had to use wood. It was starting to get cold in the tunnel, and the sentries needed to get warm. Despite the fur coat, balaclava and boot covers, it only took a few minutes outside to suffer frostbite. Standing still in the cold is terrible. The nearest heater was in the former engine room, now used as a warehouse and storage room. The engine room had been moved to the forward tunnels. I took the 3 logs of wood and carried them to the storage room. We had run out of coal and we had to use wood. It was starting to get cold in the tunnel, and the sentries needed to get warm. Despite the fur coat, balaclava and boot covers, it only took a few minutes outside to suffer frostbite. Standing still in the cold is terrible. The nearest heater was in the former engine room, now used as a warehouse and storage room. The engine room had been moved to. We had run out of coal and we had to use wood. It was starting to get cold in the tunnel, and the sentries needed to get warm. Despite the fur coat, balaclava and boot covers, it only took a few minutes outside to suffer frostbite. Standing still in the cold is terrible. The nearest heater was in the former engine room, now used as a warehouse and storage room. The engine room had been moved to the forward tunnels. I had to hurry, the sentries were freezing. The first things to dry had to be the boots. The most important thing was to keep the feet dry, especially in winter. With wet feet one got sick, and this was no place to get sick. While they were thawing, I went up to the table on the opposite side of the room and decided to turn on the gramophone to listen to some music. I took a record from the table, put it on the turntable and turned the crank to start it spinning. How good it felt to sing. Singing to give courage when cold and war take away all hope. Voices joined in chorus give warmth and strength. A beautiful song of the Alpine troops began to play.
February 25, 1917. Dear Sophia, today was a really tiring day. We started digging the Mina tunnel. The objective is the fore summit of the Piccolo Lagazuoi. We are under the orders of Lieutenants Malvezzi and Cotteren, those who blasted the Castelletto. I can't wait to get all the way down and blow up this damn mountain. To get back to you and our son. But there's still a lot of rock to move and death is always lurking. I had the night shift today. A comrade woke me up just before the end of the other shift. Once you wake up you never go back to sleep. Lice are always keeping us company. We use water and vinegar to drive them out. It has become our perfume now. Sleeping in my clothes, I only had to get out of bed and I was ready. You don't have to wash to go to work in the mine. I headed straight for the upper engine room. I arrived at the engine room. Everything was in place. The engine on the right, the compressor on the left, with the compressed air hose ending in a tank. And there on the ground some crates of dynamite, which we were to use for digging. The shift before had left us with the engine off. They could never do anything right. Now I also had to turn the engine back on. I climbed up the wooden ladder to the right of the engine to check the fuel level. Empty, I thought so. They hadn't even filled it up. I picked up a can of petrol from the ground, climbed up the ladder again and, taking the can in both hands, poured petrol into the tank until the fuel gauge reached the full mark. I climbed down the ladder and began to turn the starting handle. The flywheel began to turn and the drive belt started the compressor, which began pumping air into the compressed air tank. The tank pushed air to the drills through a large pipe that started from the engine room and went up the tunnel to the excavation area. I followed the pipe to reach the pneumatic drill. The cave was not difficult to walk through. The excavation section was about 2 by 2 meters, even mountain artillery could pass through it. The problem with the cave was not difficult to walk through. The excavation section was about 2 by 2 meters, even mountain artillery could pass through it. The problem was digging for 8 hours straight, loaded with 30 to 40 kilos of pneumatic drill and equipment. I took the pneumatic drill in my hand and turned the handle located near the pipe connection with the drill. The drill began to vibrate. I had been left to finish the job. There were 2 holes left to finish. The digging in these conditions is terrible. The dust, the exhaust from the engines, the darkness and the noise. All things that make me hate this job and this damn war, which I hate more than the rock now. We were advancing about 5 meters a day, but not everyone made it to the next day. Many of us could not stand the constant possibility of being buried by an enemy mine. We were not the only ones digging. The Austrians wanted to blow us up too. Having dug the hole, I took 1 stick of dynamite from the case of TNT and inserted it inside the rock. it was time to blow up the rock. I took the drill and returned it to the engine room. Until then we had managed to maintain an excavation speed of almost 5 meters per day. A respectable achievement, but one that required not only 24 hours a day of work, but also the experience. And reaching for the detonator, I grabbed the wooden knob with both hands and pushed it down. Gravel, dust and debris were forming after the explosion. I should have at least cleared the cave of the bulkiest debris. The unloading of materials had to be done in places out of sight of the enemy. To facilitate our work, we had specially mounted a mine cart. Reaching the cart, I picked up the debris and placed it inside the Decoval Railway.
June 18, 1917. Dear Father, these days we are finalizing preparations for the explosion of the Four Summit. I have been entrusted with the burden and honor of lighting the fuse. I will finally be able to do something concrete for Italy, our fatherland. The explosion will start the assault of the Four Summit of the Piccolo Lagazuoi. We have been preparing for this moment for almost 6 months. Avanti Savoia, all we needed to do was to connect the last fuses in the mine chamber and check that everything was perfect. Nothing must jeopardize this mission. I had to order from the Verve command center a spool of cable to complete the connections inside the mine chamber. I approached the phone. The phone was placed on the dormitory table. But something was wrong. The cables were disconnected. I took the cord to the left of the phone and attached it to the box. The usual disorganization. Nothing ever works. Having connected the cable, I had to follow 2 more steps. I turned the crank to the right of the phone.
The graft cable will arrive with the next cable car. Go and get it immediately. The work must be finished as soon as possible before the enemy discovers us and regroups.
I immediately went to the Telfer to get the cable. When I arrived at the cable car, I started the engine. When I arrived at the Telfer, I took the reel from the casing. It weighed a lot, but a lot of cable was needed to make all the connections. I carried it up to the mine chamber. To get to the mine chamber, I first had to go back to the dormitory, then on to the upper engine room, and finally from there to the tunnel that ran all the way under the Austrian trenches. Once I had reached the mine chamber, I placed the reel on the case of TNT in the center of the room, ready to make all the connections. Everything inside the chamber was ready. 33,000 kilos of TNT and dynamite crammed into a chamber carved into the rock. 4,000 cubic meters of rock had been excavated up to that point, between tunnel and dormitory. Now the tunnel leading to the mine chamber had to be closed again. Otherwise the explosion would destroy the tunnel instead of the foresummit of the Piccolo Lagazuoi. Once the excavation was complete, I took a sack of debris in both hands and began the closing of the tunnel. When the excavation was finished, it took 3 days to fill the cavity with explosive material and close the tunnel. On the night of June 19th 20th, 1917, at 9:50 p.m. the mine was detonated. I placed the last bag of debris. The tunnel was finally closed. Now all that remained was to move on to the decisive action, igniting the fuse. I went down the tunnel to the engine room. The tunnel was finally closed. Now all that remained was to move on to the decisive action, igniting the fuse. I went down the tunnel to the engine room. In the engine room was the detonator, connected to the mine chamber. I waited for the order. And at 9:50 p.m. sharp I grabbed the wooden knob with both hands and pushed it down. Night between June 19th and 20th, 1917. Dear mother and sisters. Today is the day of the assault. I will be fighting in the front line. It will be a very difficult battle. I love you all. The attack was upon us. The explosion was set for 9:50 p.m. today. I fear there will be a massacre. I have already seen so many friends die. I hope today it will not be the turn of others. Rather let God take me. He has kept me alive so much longer than other comrades who deserve to live more than me. From the main dormitory I reached the dormitory in the side tunnel. The side tunnel dormitory was set up for soldiers, unlike the lower dormitory, set up for miners instead. It housed all the combat equipment. I took a helmet from the rack overhead and put it on. I took the Carcano rifle, loaded it, and headed for the tunnel exit, ready to reach the front line. I was ready to fight. For Italy and for you, my family. I hope to come back alive for you, mother. Now you have to work the land and look after my sisters as well. It's not fair. I want to come back to give you a hand. I should be given leave soon, to help with the harvest. They usually grant leave for that. I would only come back for you, because I can't stand being with boys my age any longer. They don't understand what it's like to go to war. They ask us how long before we get to Trent and Trieste, and they don't care about the sacrifices we have to make. Good for nothings. When I got to the door leading to the outside, I grabbed the handle and went out. searchlight illuminated the battlefield. It was the searchlight positioned on top of the Sasso di Straia, a mountain near the Piccolo Lagazuoi. 2 platoons of the 75th Cadore Company were under orders to come out of the tunnel and silently scatter among the boulders. They would never make it with that spotlight on the battlefield. I had to do something to save my comrades and stop us from being seen. Otherwise we would all be killed. At the bottom of the cave a mountain cannon was installed. The cannon had been brought up in pieces. I immediately ran to the cannon. To deflect the searchlight and force the soldiers operating it to take cover. I opened the cannon door. One shot was not enough. I had to fire at least 3 to intimidate the soldiers on the Sasso di Straia. I fired another shot. I went to the embrasure to see if the searchlight was still pointing toward the battlefield. It had changed targets. The 2 platoons of the 75th Cadore Company spread out among the stones ready to go on the assault. There was very little time left until the mine exploded. I approached the machine gun. I inserted the magazine on the left side of the weapon.
Fuoco!
I was ready to support my comrades in the conquest of the foresummit. It was almost 9:50 p.m. The long-awaited minute was about to strike. All the clocks were out and all eyes fixed on the dials. A firm, dry command issued from the machine room. The mountain was shaken to its deepest roots. Flames and swirls of thick smoke alternated over an apocalyptic scene. Our artillery continued to bombard the Austrian positions, while a continuous roar of boulders was heard falling from the foresummit to the valley floor. The flares began to rain from the sky and the searchlight returned to illuminate the battlefield. Suddenly it was no longer night. Austrian machine guns opened fire at my comrades. I had to do something or they would all be dead. I spotted 4 positions inside the rock, from which the Austrians were firing at my comrades. I began firing at the enemy positions. Never would I have been able to hit them given how entrenched they were in the rock. But that was not my goal either. The only thing I wanted, and had prayed for so much, was to see my comrades and family again at the end of that day. The war was not going to take them away too. It was not fair. Bullets were hissing past me. The machine guns had discovered me and I had become their main target. Just as well, my comrades would stay alive longer.
Vicino al fuoco d'inverno si scaldavano. Nonno e nipote assieme parlavano. Raccontami, nonno, cos'è un alpino? Chiese con voce limpida il bambino. Il vecchio si raddrizzava. Ascolta, senti. E rideva, la bocca senza denti. L'alpino è il vero fior della montagna, duro come la roccia e non se lagna. Lavora e fatica senza fine e per ricompensa ha le stelle alpine. Se c'è la guerra, l'alpino è forte e corre dove c'è la morte. Se c'è la pace, l'alpino è oro, sempre pronto ad aiutare l'Italia con il lavoro. E dai monti mai si allontana e si arrampica quasi a toccare il cielo. Dimmi se hai capito e poi va a nanna, che l'alpino è il soldato più bello. Il bambino pensa e poi col vocino, che il sonno ha cambiato in un tremolio, dice: sì, nonno, lo so chi è l'alpino. L'alpino è l'uomo più vicino a Dio.